Is this where the McLaren fightback begins? At the Austrian Grand Prix this weekend, the McLaren team introduced a pretty drastic new upgrade package onto one of its cars in an effort to improve the overall performance of the car. A few weeks ago, two-time world champion Mika Häkkinen said that he expected that his former team, McLaren, to make extraordinary strides in car performance in the near future, and possibly even pose a challenge to Red Bull. Now, on the face of it, these comments seem to be wildly optimistic, even by the standards of the enthusiastic McLaren fanbase, but there may actually be something to this. The Mercedes-powered McLaren MCL60 is the only car on the 2023 grid to truly follow the Red Bull concept. That means it's got a pull rod front suspension layout and a push rod rear. And at the very start of the season, even the overall shape of the two cars was pretty much the same. Now, if you look at this graphic from earlier in the season, you can see that improvement playing out. McLaren being that orange line, the other lines are the difference between each team's development to Red Bull, who are the blue line at the bottom of the screen. Now, you can see up until Miami, McLaren wasn't really making any impact on Red Bull. And then in Miami, there was a really sharp change, and the team rapidly started to improve and get closer to Red Bull. Will this new update package tighten up that line, make it go closer to Red Bull? Mika Häkkinen thinks so. We'll have to wait and see. That rate of development is in part due to the fact that the McLaren MCL60 started the season with a lot of issues, with the team even admitting that they'd not really met their development targets over the winter for the design. And in the opening races, it struggled really badly. The teams couldn't really get into the points and had no real hope of doing so. In fact, in testing, they couldn't even keep the front brake parts together for more than a few laps. The team had underestimated the impact of the rule change that saw an increase in the height of the floor edges by 15mm. It doesn't sound a lot, but it had a massive impact on all of the teams, particularly McLaren. Since then, they've worked really hard to recover those losses by introducing a new floor earlier this year, and again here in Austria. The floor changes are probably the most powerful part of the update package, but they're mostly hidden away. And unless Lando Norris has a mishap in Styria, we probably won't get to see those details. But I do wonder how similar they are to the Red Bull designs which we did see due to a driver-induced mishap in Monaco. Only Lando Norris has access to the new parts in Austria, which gives us a great opportunity to do a like-for-like comparison, and something McLaren will be doing themselves, or at least trying to, between the old specification car driven by Oscar Piastri and the new specification car driven by Norris. Looking at the cars from behind the rear wing, you can see Oscar Piastri's car. Now, this was a few races ago, but the design's pretty much the same on his car in Austria, and the differences are so clear that you can see those massively deep valleys from just looking over from the rear wing, and you can see on Norris's car just how different it looks to that of Oscar Piastri. So it's a fundamental change to the design of the car. What we can see, however, is a drastic change to the upper bodywork surfaces. McLaren has clearly taken note of the Aston Martin AMR 23, in particular its side pod concept, which McLaren has essentially copied. Now, I think that's probably no coincidence. Let's not forget that the Aston Martin and the McLaren use exactly the same Mercedes power unit. But both cars now feature those distinctive gullies running down either side of the main body of the car. As we've said before, this is a concept that's really quite heavily inspired by the Ferrari F175, using a side pod shape that reduces aerodynamic drag a little bit. Aston Martin has taken that concept to a new extreme this season, and McLaren, Alpine and a few others are now following that lead. Overall, the entire side pod shape has changed, following that Aston Martin concept rather than the Red Bull style design that McLaren had before, and that's quite a departure for the team. Take a look too at the shape of the side pod inlet ducts. You can ignore that green cover on Norris's car, but that's a completely different shape to what McLaren started the season with. Now, they've been playing around with that area a little bit anyway, and also into last year's car, but McLaren had always sort of been going their own way on that part of the car design, and part of me sort of suspects that maybe some of that side pod duct shape was a little bit more aesthetic than aerodynamic, but I think they found an aerodynamic gain in that area. And if you think that new design on Norris's car looks familiar, then you're absolutely right. This is a direct replication of the concept first seen on last year's Red Bull, and also used on this year's car driven by Verstappen and Perez. You can see that lower edge protruding much further than the upper edge, and it's a concept that's also seen on the Aston Martin. And if you notice a trend here, that's because there is one. The mirrors on the McLaren have also been entirely redesigned along with the rest of the bodywork in the area, with those drag-reducing elements that used to go up and over the main mirror housing removed altogether. Mercedes went the same way a couple of races back as well, so that design seems to be falling out of favour. But also, if you take a look at the overall mirror support design and the mirror housing, you can see the sticky uppy bits that McLaren used in previous races and are still fitted to Piastri's car have been replaced by a longer single horizontal part, a bit like what you see on the Red Bull and on the Aston Martin. There have been changes around the halo as well. Now, while every single car on the grid is fitted with essentially the same design of halo, it's a 12-kilogram lump of titanium to protect the drivers' heads, the teams are free to develop a shroud around that metal part, and they will do, of course. McLaren has made some more changes to that shape on Norris's car this weekend, and they've adopted a number of new aerodynamic elements around it, sticky outy bits if you want to call them that, while trailing edge has also been reshaped somewhat as well. Again, it's all different bits of bodywork interacting with one another. It's not just one small change, it's a whole family of changes. And the upgrades here in Austria are not the end of the story for the MCL60. While free practice in Austria was a little bit inconclusive due to the truncated running for Lando Norris and the team not really be able to get a like-for-like comparison on the soft tyre, there is a lot more to come out of the package, and not least in terms of performance, but also in terms of new parts. According to the team, they only had about half of the new parts that they have in the pipeline on Norris's car this weekend. There's about another 25% of parts expected to go onto the car for Silverstone, hopefully onto Piastri's car as well. And then the final chunk of those upgrade package parts go onto both cars in Hungary. So it's going to be interesting to see how much more the car is going to change as we get on towards the Hungaroring. But it's also going to be a little bit early to really make a decision whether this upgrade package is really delivering on what the team want it to, because it takes a while for such a drastic package to be fully optimised by all of the teams. So what I'd say is, if these new parts do deliver as the team hope they do, then there is a chance that Mika Häkkinen is actually going to be proved right.